Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Ameyo and Uniphore jointly welcome you to Conversations 20 webinar. The topic for today's webinar is contact centers and conversational AI, the key to thriving in the contactless world. Today's webinar will see deliberations on strategy and solutions for businesses rising to meet the CX challenges to surge ahead of the pandemic. As businesses continue to replan, revise, rebuild, and reboot to stay ahead of the pandemic and prepare for the new normal, this webinar is going to do a deep dive into CX strategy, discussing remote contact centers and conversational AI. I would now like to invite and introduce our speakers, Mr. Kalidas Ghose, CEO and Vice Chairman of FE Credit. Mr. Ghose, who has been the CEO of the organization since day one, has led the team that built the organization from scratch. Starting with just 4 persons in a small office, as of today, the organization has grown to 17,000 plus employees, 10 million plus happy customers, 13,500 POS, and 9,000 partners in just a matter of 8 years. FE Credit currently holds 53% market share, by far the largest compared to any competitor. Our next speaker, Mr. Bilegt Tumurkhuyag. Mr. Bilegt is CX Senior Specialist at Combank. He has enormous experience in contact centers, customer service, and in the banking industry. A science and technology lover, Bill is involved in major customer service related projects at Combank. Combank Contact Center has been awarded as one of the best practices around the world by CCW. Our next speaker, Mr. Ravi Saraogi, is the co-founder and president APAC at Uniphore, where he leads sales, delivery, and customer success. His passion for mobile learning applications and technologies found traction when Uniphore was founded. Ravi and Umesh envisioned building solutions that give more power to human speech. Ravi has vast experience in directing technology teams in initiatives spanning mobile theft, security, wireless network development, and mobile learning applications. Ravi is currently an active member of the Mobile Payment Forum of India, where he identifies and develops business opportunities in the field of mobile payments. He is known for his excellent analytic skills, dexterity in problem resolution, and proclivity for driving operational excellence. Our next speaker, Mr. Sachin Bhatia, is the co-founder of Ameyo, and he heads global sales and marketing at Ameyo. A computer scientist by education and a product person at heart, Sachin has been involved in understanding needs and delivering customer engagement solutions to consumer-facing companies. He's been working with CIOs and customer experience leaders in over 60 countries for the last 16 years, and believes problems in emerging markets need unique solutions. So I wholeheartedly welcome all the speakers on the panel today. Also, one important point, if any of the audience has any questions, please feel free to type in your questions in the questions panel on the GoToWebinar control panel in the right. Okay, it's my pleasure to have all of you on today's panel. I would now like to invite Sachin to initiate the discussion. Over to you, Sachin.
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Conversations 20. A very warm welcome to Ravi, my friend, and Kali and Bill that we have been in touch with on the engagement problems. This is truly a Asia representation here. We have folks from Vietnam, Singapore, and Mongolia, and then us logging in from India. And then there are 15 countries represented in the audience today. So a fantastic initiative and very, very excited to be here. It has been 4 months now that the most uncertain time was shoved upon us, right? All of us couldn't expect, and all of us are living by the year that what is it that we should be doing to stay ahead of the competition and ahead of the pandemic. We at Ameyo have also keenly been talking to our customers that what is it that is really changing because of the pandemic, right? There are some obvious trends around initial lockdowns, and I think people work from home, and those were knee-jerk reactions, as we would call them. But what is it that is strategically changing? And I would lay out 3 trends that we clearly observe and initiate the discussion. The first trend that we observed is that on the service functions, there is a super cost pressure, right? As soon as the pandemic hit, everybody knew that the economy is going to take a hit. And one of the asks of the business was that how do you reduce the overall cost of service? This augmented with the anxiety that today exists in the world, because there is no physical contact. If you're ordering something, if there is something new, you're actually talking more. So there is an increased number of conversations that are happening between customers and consumers for the service use case, which is a very interesting challenge that you have increased volume, and we'll be sharing some numbers, and increased cost pressure, right? How do you solve it? That's the first trend that we have observed across Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa, as we have spoken to hundreds of contact center leaders. And the second trend that we have observed is that the sales and the onboarding processes, they cannot stay the way they are, because there was a lot of physical touch that was required in some of these, whether it's through channel partners or outlets, but it was a high touch sale, which is no longer probably feasible. And how does one now onboard new customers in a contactless world, if I may say? And those two trends are shaping some of the decisions that the leaders are taking, the experiments, the initiatives, the strategies, whether it's around digital, going remote, adopting AI. And today we are going to touch at least two of them, about going remote and adopting conversational. So Ravi, let's bring you in first. You guys have been a leader in the conversational AI and have done some good work in the emerging geos. Uh, where do you think conversational AI plays a role, and has it moved from fear of missing out to actual ROI?
Thank you, Sachin, and thank you all the other speakers here today for joining this event. Well, Sachin, it's important for us to get to the genesis of how the world has changed, and also the factor that we've been calling usually that data is the new oil. But in my opinion, while data is the new oil, unless you have a well-structured data, it does not serve the purpose. And I think AI plays a major role in from that perspective. Now, if you tie that up on the data being generated from the customer side of things, right? There are multiple channels that are being used today by customers to go ahead and communicate with the enterprises, right? And according to some of the surveys that we have done, 80% of the people that a survey that Uniphore has conducted in April 2020, 80% of the people have told that they would be more than happy to speak to an agent when there is a need. And that's where, if any organization has to use the data and really sort of fix some of the issues, there is no better medium than learning from your customers what problems are arising, right? And within that, contact center plays a major role, because most of the inputs are today coming in a contact center environment. And that's where, if you look at call centers as an history, it's been about 30, 35 years that call centers have come into being, right? And since then, call centers have gone through a lot of investments, mostly in the backend systems, from analog to digital to new age CRM systems, and then slowly and gradually more channels got inducted into the ecosystem, and call centers have truly transformed themselves into contact centers, right, with multiple channels coming in. But what has gone missing is your experience as a customer 5 years back and now has hardly changed. And that's where Uniphore sort of today focuses on, is the front office operations, where the actual conversation happens. And that's where our product of conversational AI and conversational service automation plays a major role. The whole idea is to enable each and every part of that conversation through an insight, leveraging AI, speech technologies, robotic process automations, coming in together and really helping the agent to focus on the conversation with the customer while the system takes care of all the other backend activities, right? And that's where we have seen how things are moving. We usually sort of have been seeing this messages coming to us that what has led to digital transformation. Is it the digital transformation head, the CTO, or users as well? It's important for us to know that they are not averse to new technologies and new applications as long as it serves the purpose. Case in point, COVID Safe as an application in Australia got more than 2 million registrations in 48 hours. Arogya Setu app in India got 100 million plus users now, right? Trace Together in Singapore, in a small country like Singapore, has more than 2 million registrations. Now, all those makes us believe that in time of need, if technology is an enabler, people will latch into it, right? And that's where a lot of those focuses are now being enabled by large enterprises, and that's what we see in markets like Asia. A lot of implementations are being looked at. Now, of course, as COVID had struck, people went into BAU mode to fix BAU mode. From there, now we're looking at security, we are looking at quality and assessments. Going forward, I think people will start looking at new innovations as well. But for now, that's the trend that we are seeing, Sachin. Just to add to it, we have been working with FE Credit, led by Mr. Kalidas Ghose, who is part of the panel. Kali, I would like to sort of bring you into this conversation and sort of understand from your perspectives, what are the key focus areas for you when it comes to call center operations as a FE Credit? You have been pioneering, leading with new innovations across sales, collections, customer service, and undertaking processes. What has been your experiences and what are the key focus areas for you?
Yep. So for us, obviously, as we grew our business, as I think somebody mentioned in the introduction about the number of customers we have, these are customers typically belonging to the mass and mass affluent segment. So their requirement to get back to us is fairly frequent. We had two types of contact centers. One was obviously for service, which included both inbound customer service and payment reminders, which totals to approximately 3,000 odd people, fluctuates between 2,500 to 3,000 people. And we had an outbound contact center for making new offers to primarily our existing customers and a small percentage of new customers, which amount to almost 4,500 people. So that the total strength is more than 7,000 people. So obviously that would make a huge difference if we had to bring innovation and efficiency in that setup. There were 3-4 areas where we looked at improving. One, of course, was trying to utilize direct to customer contact like a mobile app, etc., to transfer some of the communication processes. But because we are not a mobile-only organization, our appification has still remained less than 10% actively using customers. Total appification maybe around 15%. So ultimately, the contact center still remains one of the key components of our business. In fact, I would say at this point of time, 80% of our disbursals are to new customers, so new disbursals of credit lines. So contact center continues to be a very important component of our business because that is what is driving both on the onboarding side, but also on the servicing side. So 3-4 areas of innovation we tried to bring in. One, of course, appification, but not very successful because of behavioral reasons. Maybe learning curve will happen after some time. The other areas where we have worked on obviously is both using a chat mode, a conversational way. In fact, we are now working with a leading OTT app in Vietnam to have a application process that's running through chat. And because the OTT app already has some data, so we will pre-populate and confirm, but also collect in a conversational mode and then make it a more frictionless than filling up a form, which is often a little difficult for customers, especially those who belong to our target segment. And then came the whole idea of using conversational voice AI for making calls. Uniphore helped us a lot in looking at making our process efficient in terms of reducing our manpower requirements by generating hot leads to be fed into our telecalling setup on the sales side and answering some of the calls on the service side that could be handled by a machine as opposed to an individual. So using the voice part of conversational AI along with the chat or the text part. And then, of course, assisting our existing callers, existing agents in the call center with real-time suggestions or real-time recommendations in terms of the script as well as offers, etc., etc. So building AI into even the human calling process, not just look at purely conversational AI versus human, but also improve the efficiency of the human agents, of the physical agents by recommendation and assistance. So 3-4 key areas in which we have brought efficiency, and it has really helped us quite a lot. I mean, we would have probably had at least 25 to 30% more human capacity we would have required unless we brought in this type of innovations.
Interesting.
Oh, that's a pretty fantastic impact. And I must say that FE Credit has been, being a startup guy, has been at the forefront of adopting new technologies and bringing them into actual use cases. And to see that conversational AI making a 25-30% impact on, you can call it efficiency or you can call it capacity, is quite fantastic to know. Ravi, if you have a permission, can I also bring in Bill? I think this is very, very interesting. Yeah. And one observation I wanted to make, what Mr. Kalidas mentioned, that the augmentation with the mobile app and a low adoption, that's a trend that we are seeing across. And as I mentioned, I think pandemic has brought in more anxiety in the consumer's mind. And it is our firm belief that anxiety can only be answered if there's a human-to-human conversation. You cannot, it's not just about data need being met or a transaction being done, but actually a human being listening, understanding, and responding has a very, very strong impact on the psyche. And that also depends on the segment of consumers, like Mr. Kalidas rightly mentioned. I think there's this large segment in Asia which still prefers to have a conversation with a human being. Is that something that that resonates well, Mr. Kalidas? Because we have seen the same trends in most parts of Asia, barring maybe Singapore a little bit, where we have seen that the adoption, or even Japan, but Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, India, there is still this preference of talking to a human being. Is that something that you guys also observe?
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why we feel that while it's like mobile banking, if you look at it, a lot of people use mobile banking, but they use primarily for balances, transaction confirmation, and things like that. But when they have to discuss a mortgage loan or a new insurance policy or a wealth advisory, I mean, even simple transactions where the guy wants to make sure that that the money is transferred properly and all that, he comes to a branch or he calls up the call center. So preference for human interaction is still very, very strong in emerging markets, no doubt about it.
Sure. Let's bring in Bill. So, Bill, what has been your observation? I have observed that the consumer in Mongolia is really, really aware. Folks are usually tech savvy. How did the lockdown? You're one of the largest banks there, or the largest bank there. How did the lockdown impact you guys? What changes did you see in consumer behavior, or even in your operations? Can you take us through that?
Sure. Thank you, Sachin, and thank you, Ravi and Mr. Kalidas joining today. So first, let's briefly talk about what is Combank. So Combank is the largest commercial bank in Mongolia that provides all type of banking services to an estimate about 80% of Mongolian household, which is having 2.5 million customers. So we operate throughout the nation, having over 550 branches, 130 express banking centers, and 1,100 ATMs, 4,500 merchants, and so on. So, for example, as of last year, we did almost 90% of total ATM transactions and almost 80% of USSD, which is mobile banking transactions via Combank. So as a leading bank in Mongolia, we have a great responsibility to stand at the forefront for the customer service in a banking and financial sector. So our goal is and always has been to improve our customer service and become a customer-centric organization by welcoming and adapting to technological advances to our branches, digital channels, and also contact centers channels. So this pandemic actually was very much surprise for us. We weren't prepared for this, and as Sachin mentioned before, we did also see a 30% increase in the call volume to an agent. So we had to do something about it. So today I'm really excited to share what we did during this pandemic and how we did go remote.
Yeah. So is there a specific action that you guys took? I know that this project that we were doing with you guys was also under deployment. So what were some of these steps that you guys took? You said that the volume was increased by 30%. Were people working from home? Was it hybrid? Did people adopt different channels? What actually happened?
So with the help of Ameyo system, it is based on voice over internet protocol, right? And we have also integrated our other social channels, which is the chat channel, website chat, email channel. So we did work remotely, but it was hybrid. Of 40% of agents worked from home, 60% stayed at the office. That's inbound agent that I'm talking about. For telesales or outbound agents, they went 100% remote.
Wow. So that's quite a feat. Did you also see that the telesales channel, was there an increase in the sales in telesales channel because the physical channels or the branch channels were not available? Is there a start there? Because we have seen that across, I think, sales onboarding, contact center, and Ms. Kalidas also mentioned that I think contact center is becoming the primary channel to reach out to or onboard new customers. Did you guys also see that at Combank?
Yes. Of course, with the automatic dialing system of Ameyo, previously we didn't have any automatic dialing system. So by implementing the automatic dialing system, actually the telesales agent efficiency increased by 114%, which is almost one-fold. So they're doing more and more sales, connecting to more and more customers right now.
Yeah. No, I saw that during the initial days, the project impact, as Bill mentioned, this was 100+% over, and then doing it remote, sort of adds more efficiencies to it. Coming to the topic of remote, and there is this exercise that we have been doing in Conversations 20, that we have been asking questions to people. Let me just lay out some foundational numbers. In markets like Asia Pacific, and I'll do a little bit of maths for you guys. The unit economics of a contact center, if somebody's spending, let's say, $1,000 on an agent, roughly 25% of that is infrastructure cost, right? And that equation of infrastructure to the agent salary has, across Asia it varies a little bit, but it stays between 25 to 35%, barring Middle East, which is sort of an aberration. And typically that function's gross margin is considered 10 to 15% if you do it in an outsourced model, which means that if somehow you are able to run this completely remote, there's actually a potential to double your gross margin. And this is something that people, the first knee-jerk reaction was that obviously we need to go remote. Now the question is, do we stay remote, right? Is it a long-term strategy, and will it become a differentiator versus some of the other, will it reduce the cost of acquisition, or if you are a BPO, would it actually reduce cost of operations? And we went out in the market and did a survey, and we'll be doing a similar survey here, but we also asked them that what is it that is stopping you from going remote, right? What are the top challenges in mind? I mean, as a knee-jerk reaction, everybody did, but what is it that stopped you from doing? And there were three clear observations. The first, and this was a little bit of sort of an obvious thing, which was the actual infrastructure and the governance around it. How do you ensure security? How do you ensure, when a contact center is running in a on-prem office environment, an agent says, I have a problem. An IT guy can come in and quickly check what is the problem. But let's say if somebody is saying the same thing from home, do you trust the network? Do you trust the device? Or do you trust the agent, right? What do you trust? And how do you create that high trust environment? That's the first. The second we observed is that it is okay if the current employees are working remote. What if new employees have to be onboarded? How would that work out? right? Because contact center has a lot of tribal knowledge which people learn from each other, from the floor, from the TLs. How would collaboration and onboarding happen in those scenarios? And the third is the actual business matrices or operational KPIs. Do you continue to look at the same matrices, or do you actually create an entrepreneurial environment so that the output is what is driving, rather than making it into a operations floor? So those were the three challenges that we observed, and we'll do a quick poll, Nimish, in the audience, that what does the audience think, and we'll also share our findings in the Conversations 20 series, that what has been the trend there. We went out and asked this question to folks in Africa, folks in Middle East, in our Philippines edition, in our India edition, and now in the APAC edition, and some very interesting results were thrown up. In the meantime, let me bring in my fellow speakers also. Kali, what do you think? Is remote a reality? Is hybrid a reality? How is Refrigerated thinking about it? And maybe then I'll bring in Bill while the poll is happening. Quick comments there. Kali, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
So I think the whole remote operations or work from home, work remotely, remote connection, those became an absolute reality in during the COVID period, I guess, in every market as much as it was here. We were able to maintain close to 90% of our productivity levels when 65% of our people were working from home. We did not go into a complete lockdown, as you know, in Vietnam, and we had to stagger for keeping the distance at work. So we had to get two workstations vacant in order to maintain the distance. So we had to let 60% or 65, if I'm not mistaken, rotate on a twice a week basis. Now, in that, I think the productivity levels were adequate, but 2-3 issues happen. I think you've already talked about the governance and security part. I think business monitoring we were able to do because we were using one unified system. Fortunately, we were able to get the infrastructure up, but the infrastructure was not very stable. But that I'm sure we overcome over time with investment and improvement in technology, etc. Hybrid is definitely a reality that has come to stay for long. I mean, irrespective of the time that COVID ends, I think hybrid has many opportunities as well. And I think it's more, I mean, while it was forced, it has definitely opened up the opportunities at, accessing skills which you can't do otherwise through a regular employment, flexible time, working hours, and, many other opportunities have come up. Accessing skills, not just in the same market. I mean, today we are able to do across markets in areas like data science and all with the help of remote working technology. So it's a reality forever, I think, from here on.
Sure. And in short, Bill, do you think remote, hybrid, if you have to take a bet in mid to long run, would it come absolutely back to normal? Would it be remote, hybrid? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I think it also depends on the sector of the business on industries. So, for example, for healthcare industry, it might normalize after the pandemic. But for us, for example, we expect for example, the demand of contact centers to be same, and we are really forced to take idea on this remote agents. And as you just mentioned, we actually did face those issues. For example, the infrastructure, the agents are at the mercy of their home internet connection or electricity, right? But in the office at the contact center, the electricity doesn't go down, and we have multiple DR servers for the network. And also the security challenges as well, especially for banking industry. Our top #1 priority is to actually protect customer data and information at all costs. So system-wise, Ameyo is a PCI DSS system, right? But there's always a risk of human factor related risks. So for that, what we did is that we equipped the agent computers with the multiple layers of security software and tools for monitoring and actually protecting the customer information. So the idea of hybrid, I also agree with Mr. Kalidas that it is operational wise, it is saves you a cost. So some businesses might be interested in continuing this idea.
Sure. Nimish, if we can have the poll results out. Wow. See, so I would also share the numbers that we saw in other areas, but this is not very different actually. IT governance and security 48%, onboarding collaboration 28%, business operations monitoring 24%. I have the results of some of the other polls that we had done in the past. 44% IT governance, 28% onboarding and collaboration, and 28% business operations and monitoring in Africa. Very similar trend in Southeast Asia, the other webinar that we did. So it seems that, yeah, so it seems that the stats are, reflecting a mindset as well as a constant understanding and consistent understanding of what are going to be the top challenges as folks go remote. Hey, thanks, Nimish. Let me bring in post-pandemic, Ravi. You have been working with customers, large organizations across. What are the top things that people are thinking when they are either saying returning to BAU or returning to new normal, whatever you want to call it? But I don't think it's going to be BAU the way it was in February ever. But as people take steps, long-term steps, strategic steps, what are your observations? If you can come in, you've been present across, guys.
Yeah, Sachin. First of all, I think the whole poll results that came out aligns with what we're seeing overall in general in the market. From a standard BAU on-prem contact center, now the way things are moving, like Mr. Kalidas has said or Bill has said, it would become hybrid, and it would become a my anywhere contact center kind of a situation. Wherever I am, I should be able to operate, right? Now, of course, that brings in a lot of challenges for enterprises in terms of monitoring IT operations and security most importantly, especially for financial services companies, much like APAC Credit or Combank. Customer data, especially financial data and PII, is of utmost priority for all the enterprises, and that's where we see a lot of traction. Some of the common inputs that we have been getting from our customers, contact center customers, BPOs, etc., is that how do you ensure that the person who's on the other side of the phone, which is your contact center executive, is the right executive, right? How do you ensure that no one else is speaking into the screen while they're sitting at home and looking at financial data? How do you ensure that someone is not taking an image of the screen through their mobile phones? Because traditionally in contact centers, which are extremely highly secured, even phones are not allowed. So how do you ensure all of those parameters? And we are seeing a lot of inputs. On top of it, I think what also comes out is, during pandemic, what has happened, more than 30 to 35% calls have increased in the call center environment, about that range. And the number of people that were operating had gone down because people would have faced either health issues or connectivity issues or infrastructure issues. So number of agents who were active has gone down while number of calls have increased. That also brought in a lot of customer experience challenges, right? And overall quality. So overall, what we see is it's a mix of IT governance and security and customer experience being looked at together from the current discussions that we are having. And at Uniphore, what we have been able to do through our conversational service automation platform is to now work on video-based security, where we not only look at emotions, but we also do video authentication of the agents. We are able to monitor and enable the supervisors with notifications if someone is taking the photo in front of the screen. Beyond that, our quality automation product using speech is now enabled for agents who are sitting anywhere that they are, but still monitor quality across all the conversations that they are having. And aligned to that, we also ingest information around chat or email just so that we have wholesome output in terms of quality monitoring, etc. But to your point, one has to understand that earlier the overall base for hackers, if I may say so, was limited, and certainly with spread of all the agents across all different parts of the country and operations, the overall base for hackers have increased, and that has obviously brought in a lot of challenges. So we are working across all those parameters, but with the prime importance of ensuring that the financial data, the PII, those remain safe without any compromise on customer experience. Right? And these are some of the things that really have brought all our discussions to the forefront by looking at all the traditional products that we have. So Kali, to that, one of the things that you have been doing and you've been at the forefront, as I mentioned, is not only remain the market leader in terms of overall market cap, but also look at multiple innovations, etc. Your agents have gone home, come back to office. You've staggered their work timings, etc. From new age technology, etc. What are your sort of immediate goals that you are trying to put in the contact center environment, and more so from overall customer experience perspective? I think you're on mute, Kali, I think.
I would put it across in maybe 3 or 4 key areas. Of course, there are many small innovations that are happening all over the place, people trying out new testing technologies, using labs for testing new technology as well as new processes. But I would focus on maybe 3 or 4 areas. One of them is obviously moving interactions to more conversation mode rather than filling forms, sending data, etc. kind of stuff, to a more frictionless conversational mode, especially on commonly used platforms. As you know, there are a few OTT apps in Vietnam which are very popular, so we are integrating our own chat and conversation engines on those apps increasingly, for making sure that all transactions, all interactions with us can happen on those platforms. That's one part of it, and that happens real time, and that happens in a manner that the 360-degree view of the customer is available, whichever conversations are happening, to the agent who's really handling him. The second part of that is around using conversational AI for automating some of the regular routine interactions, but also in some cases for generating hot leads that which I think will become increasingly more popular for us, especially if we are to increase our contact rate with the customer, contact them at an appropriate time, so build some intelligence of the frequency and timing of those calls, etc. The third one is around the assistance, using AI to assist our human agents for making them more efficient, more productive, more effective in getting to reach their goals. And also, of course, make sure that conversational AI is also being used for building intelligence to analyze calls, and not only do skill development, but also script development, also even try to figure out, determine better offers that we can make to the customer. So involve conversational AI in the whole business cycle, as opposed to just making the human interaction more efficient or replace the human interaction, but actually use the data being captured in conversations in a manner that, using maybe speech to text, or in certain cases even text to speech, for getting insight into customer behavior, customer mind, for us to be able to cycle it back into product development, into marketing offers, etc. We are now starting to conduct online real-time selective customer service using conversational AI. And that has already started helping us in modifying our offers to increase their response, their take-up rates. And also, of course, skill development. Yesterday, I saw data where, using the results of automated QA using speech to text, we've been able to increase anything from 15 to 20% productivity of TSRs by building skills which were identified as gaps in those QA process. Also, we find that increasingly conversational AI automating some part of the routine activities in sales, in lead generation and sales conversion. We have seen campaigns where 12% of core data, lead data, has been converted into warm leads, which means that it can cut down as much as even up to 70% of our human requirement if we had to reduce it to 12% of the calls. And it increases the effectiveness of those calls because now you can focus on lesser number of calls and make them more productive. So various ways. I think at the heart of it, it's still the both speech to text and text to speech above the core foundation layer of power dialing and auto dialers and things like that. But the conversational AI technology is really helping us now to come to the forefront of providing service to our existing customers, which is very key to our future business success.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Hey, Kali, I was just thinking, we have observed that lending overall has definitely increased, and I think it's projected to increase even further. Some of the stats are saying that. Do you feel that the collections is an area which is gonna be like a forefront focus for some of the lending companies in our regions? Because we feel that there's going to be an NPA pressure across, and hence you would need to be more efficient or more optimized. Is that something that you guys are also seeing on the ground, if I may ask?
Yeah, we started as a traditional finance company. So for us, collection was, we always, coming out of conventional banks, we always felt that even the best customer can go bad if you do not have adequate portfolio management practice. So we always placed adequate emphasis, but now we are using both conversational AI as well as various types of self-service technology or chatbots and things like that for creating an integrated repayment platform, if you will, making it easier for customers with reminders, with integration with payment systems, integration with chatbots, with payment systems at the back of it, so that you can make online real-time payments. So those things are obviously we are incorporating as conventional banks, but for fintechs, especially lending fintechs, I think that was one area where there was less emphasis, with high reliance on selection of customers as kind of taking care of the collection process. But we all know with experience that doesn't happen. If your selection process is the best, unless you have focus on managing the portfolio and on the collection process, it would go bad. And this is a crisis time where many of the fintechs, especially the lending fintechs, have faced that situation. So I'm sure they are going to be seen with, you're going to see a much more heightened level of focus on collection. And therefore, in many of these cases, because it's app-based, I think the role of contact centers, not just call centers, as you mentioned few minutes back, is going to become very important. And I think there's going to be huge emphasis on that.
Now, we have observed that across fintech and lending, there's an increased focus, both in terms of dispersal as well as collections. That is happening. Bill, let me bring you in. As you guys settled into the post-pandemic contact center operations, and maybe now the mid to long-term strategic discussions would have started happening. What are the priorities for you guys? What are you guys? Are there top of the mind things that you want to work on in terms of interactions, whether it's for service, sales, collections? What are your thoughts, man?
Sure. So Combank has always been open to innovations and new technologies. For the last 3 years, we have been investing heavily for our contact center, having to implement the Ameyo system and going from multi-channel to omni-channel, from call center that provides only information to contact center as a service provider. And actually this year we have been recognized as the best contact center practices in the world by CCW Contact Center Excellence Award. So this just indicates that we are aiming to use the technology as a lever to create frictional customer experience. Of course, our vision in the mid to long range is to implement AI powered service and system to our customer service field. But currently, the NLP is not there at the moment. So we're just waiting for that to happen.
Yeah. No, I guess there have been some very, very significant advances, and both me and Ravi have been tracking it on, for example, we have done it for Vietnam and Vietnamese and not using standard engines. So we'll definitely have a chat around that. I think if the flows are predictable, then some of that can be automated today. That tech is available. Let me bring in the second burning poll that we had, and Ravi, you want to introduce that poll? We wanted to know, whether it's going to be work from home model, the future, and would it impact the experience? Would it impact the service? Ravi, can you walk us through some of your observations while people are filling this poll?
No, absolutely. In April 2020, we did a survey, Sachin, and what came out, as I've told, that while the number of calls have increased post-lockdown, before the lockdown, there were multiple studies suggesting that the call center operations are actually going down because of more and more digital channels. And immediately as COVID had struck, right, people have gone back to the traditional modes and started calling. With that, what also has happened is most of the enterprises were caught on wrong foot, unfortunately, not because of they were not having the right kind of services or the right kind of technology, but it was more of the demand that was being generated on number of calls, and that had led to multiple things. On our survey, what we figured out was that while number of calls have increased, customers have shown a lot of patience, but 33% of the callers had to wait more than 30 minutes on hold, just on hold, right? Of which 5% are saying that they have actually waited for more than 2 hours. Right? That has been a huge customer experience blot. Obviously, patients have been tested. There have been about 42% customers who have gone ahead and disconnected their calls at least once or twice because of the wait time itself. And those obviously had led to a lot of challenges in terms of customer experience, and that certainly has become a theme of discussions, that if there are conversations which are transactional in nature, quick to resolve, why not use a digital medium, be it a voice-based IVR application in local language, regional language, or a chat-based application which is conversative in nature. Why not enable that? And at least those conversations can be handled by the virtual agent. And if there is anything complex, then it goes to a real life agent. Within that also, agents are also people like us, human beings, and they are under tremendous pressure. There is always a call which is waiting to happen while they are on their current call, and that brings in tremendous pressure, and they are always on the hook to move from one to another. And with that, the experience also takes a beating. And that's what we have seen. Would love to see what's the result of this particular survey with the attendees today in this call, but that has been the general sort of trend that we have gone through.
Sure. Nimish, can we have, okay. So, wow,
Yeah.
45% people says most likely it is impacted. 35% says it's, it's still the average, and not at all is 20%. So you're right, Ravi. I think it's most likely impacting the experience of the end customer.
I'll share one quick example. My folks are in India, and I thought if there is a way to bring them here in Singapore, I go back to India as the lockdown was happening. I had to make multiple calls to different airlines. I had to make multiple calls to the embassy just to figure out the process. Unfortunately, could not happen, but I probably would have spent about 4 hours in one single day just waiting on those calls, and probably talking about 8 to 10 minutes actually across 2 or 3 different airlines. So the conversation were only for 8 to 9 minutes, where I had to be on the calls for about 4.5 hours. So that has been some of our experiences, and goes without saying that obviously brings in a lot of pain for the end customers. We are not putting pressures here on our customer care executives, but such has been the scenario, unfortunately. And that's where I think most of our conversations today are happening with all our customers, potential customers, that how do we go ahead and digitize more and more, especially the low-hanging conversations, and one which goes to the agents, how can we maintain optimum quality and not let the customer suffer.
Reminds me of a hack that I discussed with one of the customer-facing leaders in India in the general insurance segment. So they experienced a huge increase in the inbound calls, and there were two simple steps that can be done on any technology, right, which can solve the problem for them. The first was that if you can identify what could be the primary reason of the call, just take a guess, right? So if Sachin is calling in and his policy is up for renewal, while he's waiting on the IVR, send him a WhatsApp or a SMS with that status and play that message that we have sent you. If that solves your problem, great. The second is, if the wait time goes beyond a certain point, translate it into an outbound call, right? So because the inbound call, the volumes are usually staggered, right? There would be a peak and there'll be a trough. If you can just say that, okay, we'll call you back as soon as the rep is available, or even give them an estimated time that we'll call you at this time, the experience, the NPS, the waiting time is still the same, but the NPS goes up by multiple points because the customer is not having that uncertainty of when that would happen. So these are two simple hacks that I learned from a leader. They implemented it during COVID and then started taking the conversational steps. So this can be done over a weekend, right? If you have the right tech, these two steps, and that would sort of use the agents more evenly, and would probably increase NPS by a lot. Okay, good. That was just a side conversation I was reminded of. Ravi, any closing remarks, any observations from what we learned today that you would like to share with the audience? And in the meantime, if there are any questions, folks, please put them on the chat. There are some audience questions that we already have collected. Those would be taking immediately after remarks. But Ravi, go ahead.
No, thank you, Sachin, for having me over, and the panelists for sharing their time. Really appreciate all the inputs. I think a couple of key learnings for me is how FE Credit and Combank have really sort of continued to evolve during the pandemic. I think one of the things that Kali mentioned, that they never shut down, which has not happened probably with any other organization globally. And continued with business. I think that translates into the market leader position that FE Credit has taken in the Vietnam market. But more importantly, I'm excited about some of the opportunities that COVID has also brought in terms of digital transformation, and how organizations are now viewing their whole operations on a long-term perspective with a hybrid mode. Which is one of the key takeaways today, that as we move wide in the curve, things would remain potentially in hybrid mode, and that would also be important to cover ourselves for the next pandemic if it ever happens. So those were some of the key important things that I thought would be key takeaways for me today.
There is, there were very, very good points that both Kali and Bill made. I think something that stands out is that increased volume is going to be a reality for some time to come, and increased cost pressure is something that the contact center leaders are continuously going to face. So with increased volume and increased cost pressure, that cannot be done by doing something we are already doing better than that, right? There has to be a different method, whether it's and those choices could be made rationally, whether it's augmenting it with digital channels which have a little less cost to serve, or completely going remote, which has anyways a 25% upside, or adopting conversational AI to sort of augment and then derive intelligence out of it and increase conversions. So I think those are steps that we are observing. And what is good to observe is that Asia is actually no longer a laggard in adopting technology. You will see that some of the new use cases, because the cost unit economics is so different in emerging, when these use cases are done in Asia, the result is super phenomenal, because the manpower cost compared to the West versus here is so different. So if you are able to crack and use AI in these markets and able to give tangible results, it'll be pretty phenomenal. Nimish, if there are any questions, you can take them now. If there are questions, we can take them now. Okay. Let me see. Okay, the first question seems to be for maybe Ravi or Kali both can take it. Kali, you can take it. They're calling it robocalling, but basically, the outbound automated outbound calls through a bot. Does it give a human feel? Are people responding the same way they would to a human? Is there a difference or a percentage that you can say?
I think for us, it took us, and I guess Ravi's would be able to comment on it much better than I can, but I think it took us close to, I think 3 months to get to the first level of calling, and then maybe 6 to 9 months ultimately to reach where we are today, where we are confident of, we make almost, I believe, 1.2 million data is called every month. So, and I think there are about 8 or 10 spins which happen on every record. So it's close to 8 to 10 million calls, maybe even more, maybe close to 12 million calls. So obviously we do not see, I mean, the customer experience seems to be absolutely fine as of now. The longer the conversation, it becomes more difficult to keep the quality of or the appearance of a human being at the other end. I believe that people have reached close to 7-8 minutes of calling. Our typical calls are about 1.5 minutes or so. So in those, roughly around a minute. And in those calls, the distinction between a human and a machine voice is not that significant.
Awesome.
Yeah. Just to add to that,
Ravi, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, Sachin, as Kali mentioned, I mean, today we started with about 200,000 calls a day, and today we're doing about 1.2 million calls, right, per month. Sorry, and one of the critical factors one needs to understand is in an earlier time, right? In a typical outbound calling scenario, one would have contacted or made 100 calls, of which probably 2 or 3 would have got converted. Now, even if the conversion ratio remains the same, right, the first 90 calls, of which are potentially not even qualify as a hot lead or a warm lead, are checked by the robocalling system itself. The ones which are actually hot or warm are immediately hot transfer to the agent. So the robocalling process is a great sort of factor in to, even if the conversion rate remains the same, the application enables us to ensure that the filtering process is really high. So your agents today can actually handle more calls which are actually hot and warm in nature, rather than just making all those 100 calls and still converting the same ratios. So that's how we've been doing that.
And it takes time, guys. Both Ameyo and Uniphore, I think we worked really hard on this deployment to make sure that there's a human-like experience with each delay that was being counted for. And I think this has been a phenomenal success as a project in terms of giving that conversational experience to the customer and super efficient way of making those calls. And as Ravi said, the hot leads, this is augmented by a human being as soon as the intent is identified. So you don't try and close the sale with the bot. The sale will definitely be made by the agent, but you basically qualify a much larger number to do that. Okay, Ravi, this one is for you. Probably which sectors or which verticals or which use cases you've seen in Asia Pacific specifically, the use of conversational AI, maybe because of the pandemic or otherwise also.
I think 2 sectors certainly stand out amongst, or I would say 3 sectors specifically stand out. One is the BPO itself, which is the entire outsourcing process led by the large BPOs today, and many of them are in India and Philippines. The second one would be the insurance within BFSI. Insurance has sort of had a lot of uptake, especially during COVID times. And the third one would be telecommunications. People are today relying on connectivity and connections, and that has seen a significant uptake with the conversations that are landing into a telecommunication provider. And those are the 3 sort of sectors that we have seen a large uptake in terms of demand increase. Banks have always been in front of adopting new technologies, and most of the banks were enabled with digital forms, digital mediums of communication. So that within that segment, those channels have seen an uptake, but with insurance, telecommunication, and BPO, new technologies which are especially focusing on security, etc., have seen a lot of uptake, like voice biometrics or video biometrics, etc.
Sure. I'll also share our observations here at Ameyo. So, financial, definitely the biggest uptake on the conversational interfaces. We have also seen online retail and edutech picking up some of the new channels as well as AI. We also believe video is going to have a very, very solid uptake in some of the segments in edutech as well as health. And in India, for example, video KYC as a process just picked up, and that has a lot of applications of AI, though it still requires a human being by the regulator to validate, but you can still augment it with AI on actual proof of identity, matching it through a system database that you have. Okay, next question is, will omni-channel contact center become a trend after COVID? I think it is already a trend, but COVID would accelerate it. Yeah. I would want to share one very interesting interaction I had with my bank, which led me to think that it's not going to be just omni-channel, but within one channel, 3 mediums that are going to come in. So I'll just take you through a small journey. I received a collections notification on my WhatsApp, and there was a very simple message that your payment is due so and so on this date. Do you have sufficient balance? And I said yes, and the bot responded, thank you. Is there anything else I can help you with? I wanted to check, is the interest rate changing because of the situation? So I asked that question. The question could have been answered by a bot, but immediately a human being came and said, we have a low interest rate product that you can shift your loan to. Now think about it. Within one WhatsApp discussion, we had a message, a bot, and a human being talking to me all in a span of 1.5 to 2 minutes. That I believe is going to be the future. So you would have these three mediums talking through the same channel, very seamless for the end customer. And this can then happen across channels. So you could come in from Facebook, you would come in from email, you could come in from chat or voice, and you would have a message and a bot and a human being, whatever be the intent and the need coming in, responding to your queries. That I think is the new trend. But omni-channel, yes, definitely the cost of channels would reduce. That would be a trend. Okay, I think this was a phenomenal discussion. One of the most data-oriented sessions that we have had in recent time. A lot of nuggets of wisdom. We'll be writing about this. You can follow our blog in case you want to know more on the data. Ravi, thank you so much as a partner, as a friend. Mr. Kalidas.
Hello.
Sorry?
Hey, there's one more question in the questions panel. Okay. Can you take that?
I think, yeah, okay, I have the slides in front of me. Ravi, what languages are today supported out of the box? I think that that slide went off, but I saw that question. In the conversational space, what languages today can be delivered over a conversational interface?
Given that we are in Asia and talking about Asia, most of the major Asian languages of Southeast Asia are part of the package. We overall deliver more than 100+ global languages. But in the context of Asia, all the major languages like Thai, Mandarin, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Bahasa, Malay, 16 Indian languages, Tagalog, or English of the region. In Singapore, we call it Singlish, which is Singaporean English, etc. All are part of the package. Bill, we can also probably work around and turn it around for Mongolian as well, and more than happy to have the discussion with you at the right time.
Sure, we'll be interested in it.
Language is no longer a bottleneck. Ravi, a partner, a friend, thank you so much for joining in. Our drink is still due in Singapore. Mr. Kalidas, a pleasure seeing you. You have been an inspiring model for the startups in India. Let me tell you that you're an early adopter. A lot of my entrepreneur friends look up to you, that if you build something, definitely Efficredit will use it. And Bill, thank you so much for joining in, man. It's always a pleasure to get your insights on the process. Nimish and the team, thank you for organizing this. Thank you everyone for joining in. I think we are right on time, right bang on time in finishing this. Thank you so much, and looking forward to more interactions on both remote and conversational on our LinkedIn and blog page. See ya, guys. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.